Sometimes you get this feeling like things are changing in ways we've never really seen before.
That's true.
Uh,
And it feels like that's exactly what's happening right now with global trade.
there's a lot going on, and it's hard to keep track of it all. But I think there's one development in particular that has the potential to rewrite the rules of the game.
The emergence of something called the Middle Corridor.
Right, the middle corridor. So what exactly is the middle corridor?
Well, in the simplest terms, it's a new trade route.
A new trade route. But haven't we always had trade routes connecting Asia and Europe?
We have. But the Middle Corridor is different.
Different how?
Well, for one thing, it takes a completely different path.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So picture this. Instead of goods traveling by sea for weeks on end, imagine a network of railways and shipping lanes cutting right through the heart of Eurasia. We're talking Kazakhstan, the Caspian Sea, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey.
So instead of going around, it cuts right through the middle.
Exactly. And that's where the name comes from, the Middle Corridor.
Clever. But what's the big deal about going through the middle? What difference does it make?
Speed.
Speed.
Instead of those weeks-long journeys by sea, goods could be transported between Asia and Europe in a matter of days.
Wow, that's a huge time saver.
It is. And it's a game changer for industries where speed is everything. Think electronics, automotive parts, perishable goods.
Makes sense. The faster you can get your products to market, the better. But is it just about speed?
No, there's a geopolitical angle to this as well.
I was wondering when geopolitics would enter the picture.
It's always lurking in the background, isn't it?
It is. So how do geopolitics play into the middle corridor?
Well, the traditional maritime routes that connect Asia and Europe, like the Suez Canal, they often pass through choke points.
Choke points, meaning narrow passages that could be easily blocked or controlled.
Precisely. And those choke points have often been under the influence of, shall we say, certain Western powers.
I think I see where you're going with this.
The Middle Corridor bypasses those choke points. It offers a more direct and potentially more secure route for goods to flow between Europe and China.
So this is about more than just trade then. It's about control. It's about who has the leverage in the global economy.
It's about shifting the balance of power.
And where does China fit into all of this?
Well, the Middle Corridor is a key part of China's Belt and Road Initiative.
The BRI, right. I've heard that acronym thrown around a lot, but I'll admit I'm a little fuzzy on the details.
It's a massive undertaking, but it essentially boils down to China investing in infrastructure projects all around the world.
Roads, railways, ports, that sort of thing.
All of that and more. Energy pipelines, digital networks, you name it. It's all about connecting China to the rest of the world through a vast network of trade routes.
And the middle corridor is one piece of that network.
A crucial piece.
So China is putting a lot of money into making this middle corridor a reality.
They are. They're investing heavily in modernizing railways, expanding ports, and improving logistics all along the route.
And I'm guessing they're not doing it out of the goodness of their hearts.
Well, there's certainly an economic incentive for China. They want to secure access to new markets and resources.
Sure, it makes sense from a business perspective.
But there's also a strategic element to it. The Middle Corridor gives China more options, more leverage, more independence
Independence from?
from the traditional trade routes that have been dominated by Western powers for so long.
So it's a way for China to chart its own course in the global economy.
Exactly. And it's sending ripples through the entire system.
So if China is pushing for the middle corridor, and they're the ones with the deep pockets, are European nations just going along for the ride?
Not quite. While China is certainly a driving force, European countries are actively embracing this shift as well.
They are.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They see the potential benefits, both economic and strategic.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, access to faster, more affordable trade routes is a huge boost for their economies. But it's also about reducing their reliance on global shipping giants, many of which are based in the West.
So it's about diversifying their options, having more control over their supply chains.
Exactly. And we're seeing this play out in real time.
How so?
Countries like Hungary, Poland, and Romania are pouring investments into their rail networks and logistics systems to link up with this Eurasian network. They're upgrading their infrastructure, streamlining customs procedures, doing everything they can to make themselves attractive hubs for this new trade route.
Smart move. Get in on the ground floor while you still can.
And it's not just individual countries. The European Union itself is becoming more involved with the Belt and Road Initiative.
Really?
Oh, yes. Italy and Greece, for instance, are upgrading their ports and infrastructure through BRI projects.
Interesting. So this isn't just a fringe idea. It's gaining traction at the highest levels of government.
It is, and it's a clear sign that Europe is serious about shifting its trade strategies eastward.
Which brings us to the big question. What about the U.S.? How are they reacting to all of this?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. For decades, the U.S. has been a dominant force in global trade. They've controlled key maritime routes, they've had a lot of leverage. But this middle corridor, it seems to be shifting the playing field.
It is. And it's forcing the U.S. to rethink its strategies.
So are we witnessing a decline in U.S. influence when it comes to global trade?
It's more complicated than a simple decline. While these new trade routes do lessen reliance on U.S.-controlled routes, the U.S. still holds significant economic and political power.
Right. They're not going away anytime soon.
No, but their dominance is being challenged.
So what are they doing about it?
Well, there are initiatives like the Blue Dot Network, which promotes high-standard infrastructure development around the world.
I've heard of that. It's often seen as a counter to China's Belt and Road, right?
It is. But whether it can compete with the scale and speed of the BRI is another question.
It seems like there's a lot for the U.S. to consider as this new trade network takes shape.
There is. And it's not just about economics. It's about geopolitics. It's about alliances. It's about the future of global power.
It's about a whole lot more than just moving goods from point A to point B.
It is. And that's what makes this story so fascinating.
It really is. And speaking of fascinating, you mentioned earlier that the Middle East is becoming a central player in all of this.
Oh, yes. And that's where our story gets even more interesting.
I'm all ears.
Think of the Middle East as a bridge between Europe and Asia.
Budge.
Exactly. And at the heart of that bridge, we have Turkey.
Turkey.
Turkey is strategically positioned at the crossroads of these continents. And they've been making some very savvy moves in recent years.
Like what?
They've been investing heavily in modern railways, expanding their port capacities, basically turning themselves into a critical transit hub for the middle corridor.
So they're not just sitting back and watching this unfold. They're actively positioning themselves to benefit from it.
They are. They see the potential here, and they're seizing it.
And it's not just Turkey, right?
No, other countries in the region are getting in on the action as well.
For example.
Iraq, for instance. They're investing billions of dollars in infrastructure to connect their ports to Europe through the middle corridor.
Wow, so this is really reshaping the entire region.
It is, and it's creating all sorts of new opportunities and challenges.
Challenges.
Well, the Middle East is a complex region with a lot of history, a lot of competing interests. So this new trade network is bound to create some friction as well.
Makes sense. Whenever you have a shift in power dynamics, you're going to have some winners and some losers.
True enough. But it's also an opportunity for the Middle East to redefine its role in the world.
To move beyond the old conflicts and rivalries and forge new partnerships based on shared economic interests.
That's the hope, at least.
It's a hopeful thought. And it brings us back to the bigger picture. We've got this new trade network emerging, the Middle Corridor, which is reshaping global trade, shifting power dynamics, and creating all sorts of ripple effects.
It's a truly transformative development.
It is, and it all seems to be happening so fast. It's hard to keep up.
It is. But that's the nature of the world we live in now. Everything is interconnected. Everything is in flux.
And sometimes it feels like the ground is shifting beneath our feet.
Sometimes it feels that way. But even in the midst of change, there are patterns, there are trends, there are stories that help us make sense of it all.
And that's what we're trying to do here today, to tell the story of the Middle Corridor and explore its implications for the future.
Exactly. And I think we're just scratching the surface.
I think so too. There's so much more to uncover.
There is. And I can't wait to delve deeper into this fascinating and rapidly evolving story with you.
Me too. And I can't wait to see where this journey takes us.
It's going to be quite a ride, so buckle up and let's dive in.
All right, let's do it. But first, a quick word from our sponsors.
You know, it's interesting. When we talk about trade, we often just think about like the physical stuff, right?
Right, like actual goods moving from one place to another on ships and trains and trucks.
Yeah, but with the middle corridor, we're seeing something else emerge alongside all of that. A kind of digital Silk Road, you could say.
A digital Silk Road. What do you mean by that?
Well, as all these railways and ports are being built as part of the middle corridor, there's this parallel development happening with digital infrastructure.
So we're not just talking about physical roads and bridges, we're talking about digital pathways as well.
Exactly. We're talking about fiber optic cables, data centers, even undersea cables, all being laid down to connect Asia to Europe through the heart of the Middle East.
So it's not just about moving goods faster, it's about moving information faster as well.
Precisely. And that has huge implications for all sorts of things.
Like what?
Well, think about e-commerce. For starters, the speed and reliability of online transactions could increase dramatically.
Right. If data can travel more quickly between continents, that means faster loading times, smoother online shopping experiences.
Exactly, and it's not just about shopping either. It could revolutionize things like cloud computing.
Cloud computing. How's
Well, right now, a lot of the big data centers that power the cloud are concentrated in a few key locations. But with this new digital infrastructure spreading across Eurasia, you could see data centers popping up in all sorts of new places.
So instead of having these centralized hubs, we could have a more distributed network, which could make the whole system more resilient.
Exactly. And potentially more affordable as well if there's more competition among providers.
This is really fascinating. I hadn't thought about the digital implications of the middle corridor before, but it makes perfect sense.
And it raises some interesting questions about the role of the U.S. in all of this.
Right. The US has been a dominant player in the tech world for so long. Will they be able to maintain that position as this new digital landscape takes shape?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
They certainly have the expertise, but will they be able to adapt to this changing environment? Will they be able to forge the necessary partnerships to stay competitive?
It's almost like we're witnessing the birth pangs of a new digital world order.
In a way, we are. The paths that data travels are shifting, and that's going to have profound implications for everyone.
It's mind-boggling when you really stop and think about it. But, while we're on the topic of shifting landscapes, there's another piece of this puzzle we need to talk about.
And what is that?
Energy. How does energy fit into the equation?
Ah, yes, energy. Well, you see, the middle corridor isn't just about moving goods and data. It's also about moving energy resources.
Now that you mention it, I do recall reading about new pipelines being built as part of the Belt and Road Initiative.
That's right. We're talking about pipelines carrying oil and natural gas
Yeah.
from the energy-rich regions of Central Asia directly to Europe.
So this is about providing Europe with more energy options, reducing their reliance on Russia, perhaps?
Exactly. It creates a more diverse and resilient energy network, which is particularly important in a world where energy security is a top concern.
But wouldn't this have a significant impact on Russia?
It certainly would. They've been a major energy supplier to Europe for decades, and the middle corridor could disrupt that relationship.
So there are some serious geopolitical implications here.
It's a delicate balancing act for European nations. They need to secure reliable energy supplies while navigating their complex relationships with both Russia and China.
And given the global push towards renewable energy, I wonder how that factors into all of this.
That's a key question. Will these new pipelines become stranded assets as the world transitions to cleaner sources of energy? Or will they be adapted to transport hydrogen or other renewable energy carriers?
It's almost like we're watching two seismic shifts happening at the same time, a change in global trade routes and a change in global energy systems.
And the interplay between those two shifts is going to be fascinating to watch unfold.
It really is. It's like we're living through a historical turning point, but it's all happening so quickly that it's hard to grasp the full significance of it.
It is a time of rapid transformation, but
Yeah.
that's also what makes it so exciting. There are so many possibilities, so many potential paths forward.
And so many unknowns as well.
True, but that's the beauty of it, isn't it? We're not just observers. We're participants in this unfolding story.
We are. And the choices we make today will determine the course of events for years to come.
So let's choose wisely.
Indeed. Let's choose wisely, but let's also not forget to marvel at the sheer audacity of it all. I mean, who would have thought even a few decades ago that we'd be witnessing such a profound reshaping of the global landscape?
It's truly remarkable.
It is, and it makes you wonder what other surprises the future holds.
Only time will tell. But one thing is for sure, the world is never going to be the same again.
And that's either a terrifying thought or an exhilarating one, depending on your perspective.
Perhaps it's a bit of both.
Probably. But, one thing that strikes me as we've been discussing the middle corridor is how often we frame it in terms of competition.
Competition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's a race between China and the U.S. or a struggle for dominance between East and West.
It's a natural way to think about these things, I suppose, especially when you're talking about geopolitics and economics.
I know, but what if we're looking at it all wrong?
What do you mean?
What if instead of seeing the middle corridor as a source of division, what if we saw it as an opportunity for collaboration
Collaboration.
between
Between everyone, between the U.S., China, Europe, the Middle East, everyone.
That's a pretty radical idea.
It is, but think about it. Instead of pouring resources into competing initiatives, what if we pooled our efforts and worked together to make the middle corridor even more efficient and beneficial for everyone involved?
It's an intriguing thought, but Is it even realistic?
Why not?
Hmm.
We've seen glimpses of this kind of cooperation in the past, even amidst geopolitical tensions.
True. There have been moments where nations have recognized the benefits of working together for a common goal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So why couldn't the Middle Corridor be one of those moments?
I suppose it could, but it would require a significant shift in mindset, a willingness to move beyond the zero-sum game mentality that has dominated international relations for so long.
I agree it wouldn't be easy, but I think it's worth striving for. It is, after all, we're all facing the same global challenges. Climate change, resource scarcity, economic instability.
Exactly, and none of us can solve these problems alone.
So perhaps the Middle Corridor could be a catalyst for a new era of cooperation.
A way for us to realize that we're not just competing against each other. We're all in this together.
It's a powerful vision.
It is, and it's a vision that I think is worth pursuing.
I agree, it's a long shot, perhaps, but sometimes the most improbable ideas are the ones that change the world.
Exactly. So let's not give up on the possibility of a more collaborative future.
Let's not, and let's use the Middle Corridor as a starting point,
A bridge not just between continents, but between people.
a symbol of our shared humanity.
Beautifully said. I think that's a perfect note to end on.
It really makes you think, you know?
It does. It really does. And it's not just about the Middle Corridor itself. It's about what it represents. It's about this larger shift that's happening in the world.
This shift towards a more multipolar world.
Exactly. For centuries, global trade has been dominated by a handful of powerful nations, mostly in the West.
But now with the rise of China and other emerging economies, that dominance is being challenged.
And the Middle Corridor is a symbol of that challenge. It's a sign that the old rules no longer apply.
It's a sign that we're entering a new era, one where power is more diffuse, more distributed.
And that's a good thing, right? I mean, more players at the table should lead to more balance, more stability.
In theory, yes, but it also creates new complexities, new challenges.
Because when you have more players with more power, it's harder to predict how things will play out.
Exactly. Alliances shift, interests collide, and the potential for conflict increases.
So it's not all sunshine and roses?
It's not, but it's also not all doom and gloom either.
That's true. I guess it's all about how we navigate this new landscape.
It is, and it's about recognizing that the old ways of thinking, the old zero-sum game mentality, won't work anymore.
We need a new approach, one that's based on cooperation and mutual benefit.
Exactly an approach that recognizes that we're all interconnected, that our fates are intertwined.
Because at the end of the day, we're all sharing this planet.
We are, and we need to find ways to work together if we want to solve the challenges we face.
Challenges like climate change, poverty, inequality.
Exactly. These are global problems that require global solutions.
And the Middle Corridor could be a part of that solution.
How so?
Well, think about it. The Middle Corridor is bringing together countries from all over the world.
True. It's connecting Europe, Asia, the Middle East.
And that kind of connectivity could create new opportunities for collaboration, for sharing knowledge and resources.
It could also help to build trust and understanding between different cultures.
Because when you're working together towards a common goal, it's harder to see each other as enemies.
That's right. Shared challenges can often bring people closer together.
So perhaps the Middle Corridor isn't just about trade routes and economic alliances.
Perhaps it's also about building a more peaceful and sustainable future.
A future where we work together to solve problems instead of fighting over resources.
A future where cooperation trumps competition.
It's a hopeful vision, isn't it?
It is, and it's one that I think is worth striving for.
I agree wholeheartedly. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have from the nuts and bolts of the Middle Corridor to its potential impact on the global order.
And we've explored a lot of different perspectives along the way.
We have, and I think that's important because there's no single right answer when it comes to something as complex as this.
That's true. There are many different ways to interpret what's happening and many different potential outcomes.
But one thing is clear, the world is changing, and the Middle Corridor is a symbol of that change.
It's a reminder that we need to stay informed, engaged, and open to new possibilities.
And it's a challenge to us all to think critically about the future we want to create.
Well said. So to our listeners out there, we hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought.
We hope it sparked your curiosity and inspired you to learn more about this fascinating topic.
Because as we've seen today, the Middle Corridor is more than just a trade route. It's a story that's still being written.
And it's a story that we're all a part of.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep until next time.
Farewell.
Goodbye.